So in other words, fitness here is of a different kind. Yogi's fitness is different than what maybe we understand as fitness in Western terms today. Yogi's fitness is psychological. This is where the fitness is first and foremost. It's psychic fitness, you see? So the yogi will come across perhaps as a very, very peaceful man, right? And not to take it like, today, woman, serene. But don't make wrong assumptions. There's a lot of tapas and fire. There's a lot of fearlessness already.
I have a few questions related to personal lifestyle choices and curiosity related to my profession. A little bit of background. The first spiritual practice I engaged with was Pattabhi Jois's Ashtanga Yoga. That was some time ago now. Since then, I've had phases where I've been quite into strength training, more kind of functional. And I know you stress or you put emphasis on relaxation and the neurophysiology in this process. And I'm curious as to know how soft and subtle does the body need to be for this process, and does having a particular density in the body, particularly like the fascia, impede pranayama process or even the Kundalini process? And to go a bit deeper, I'm curious, is there like a direct relation between the gross physical and the subtle bodies? Perhaps even like the nadis? Is the kind of state of our physical physiology kind of impacting that? And then if you may also speak to how kind of karma samskaras sort of manifest through our physical structures. I just have some kind of gaps in my knowledge, and I'm curious as it relates to, as mentioned, lifestyle and my profession as a body worker.
Okay. Well, first of all, I don't put an emphasis, let alone stress, on neurophysiology. Consciousness does. It's just way of the language, because in the spiritual discourse, it felt conversation in that, let's say, direction was lacking of importance of what physiology, in neurophysiology, we should say, plays here. And well, that's why it's Tantra, because Tantra is all about neurophysiology. It's literally recreating the body, recreating. Sometimes to such extent that body is almost dismantled first to its essentials. We're talking about, if you want that conversation, we speak about the potentials, variables, so as to rebuild it entirely. See? I've seen this myself. I've gone through this myself. My own body metamorphs completely, like entirely, almost like the footages and pictures that it's a different body. Maybe outwardly, superficially, but I know it is. And I also was because I was very weak as a child and not even allowed to exercise. So heart condition at birth, like, this, like, like doctors, so like could die, and until the age of 5, it wasn't even certain. So of course, my mother, she bringing me up alone. There was no time to really like assess that. Stuffed with antibiotics, like deadly dosage apparently of penicillin was given to me. Back in the days, it was like But then I was fortunate enough to meet my mentor, and I never look back, because I've entered this very, very different field. This man, like he was surrounded by all these men, were all martial artists, some of them were Korean sports, like stuntmen. I've met a group of elite stuntmen from Moscow. They were all friends of my mentor's brother. They would come to crush in Uzbekistan to eat sweet melons and seedless grapes, then the best, in September. And of course, it was fascinating to see this man who would, like, perform these stunts. And of course, they drank crazy. They drank, they sang, and then they would work out crazy in the morning, all that. Really young, strong. Asians, Caucasians. Beautiful, bearded, dark hair. Hairy man, Of course, for a skinny, weak teenager, there was like, I decided I'm going to build this body, of course. And so secretly, I started building, and in no time, my mentor's brother, he saw that, he put me into boxing. So I relate to that very much. But the reason I'm saying that is that, to me, this also was a fascinating topic, because I also did yoga. I did Ayanga instead of Ashtanga. It's also very physical. Ayanga was like a gymnastics of the yoga, ultimate gymnastics of the yoga, right? Where you hold the postures and right, and strength required, balance, and the rest of it. And I served in the military for 2 years. I worked with sportsmen. I did all this, stuff that like couldn't put a single item when I came back home. I had to buy a new wardrobe. What I've realized, though, is what happens at the level of prana and everything, all to do with the nervous system, above all else. So you must be familiar somehow with Bruce Lee's legacy. It's a lot out there now. With the social media and stuff, more and more, like various kind of ways. And of course, it's like some people, he was just an actor and this and that. It doesn't matter whether he was real warrior, real combatant, or just an actor. He was fast and he was strong. And this was recorded, and it's a fact, right? And even if the guy like Mike Tyson says that Bruce Lee was an animal, then that must mean something, right? But Bruce Lee, above all else, was very educated in his own culture. He absorbed this culture when he grew up in Hong Kong. We know that some of the lines, what he spoke in the interview when he's wearing a suit, have you seen that? That's incredible, isn't it? He speaks there as a spiritual teacher of a higher caliber. He's eloquent. He's full of confidence which comes from the right place. It's not made up. These are not learned lines, lived lines. If you know that, he said, all the strength, when we speak about the strength, is all in the nervous system. So in other words, this is where the strength really lays. The strength of a horse is in a tendon, not in the muscle. This is the proverb. Strength of the horse is in a tendon. If there's a tendons are strong, we can always feed the horse and muscles will grow. So density and state of the body. State of the physical body here is actually secondary. Secondary, always secondary. The most important thing is a state of the nervous system if we speak about this neurophysiology, because that's where the weakness is. And that's where, when we go through anything in life, I've been in the military, forgive me for this kind of continued referrals, and I've seen guys who were like, we call them, I'm translating, milk and butter. Big guys from Russia, from Moscow, from in Asia, and we are in a desert. And it's harsh conditions, They melt there. All there, they're pumped up, they're big guys, they're strong, they look, when they're fresh, they arrive. But then, first week, second week, third week, they all become looking like shadows of themselves. And these guys from villages, from Uzbekistan, from Caucasus, Dagestan, Ossetia, Tajikistan, Kazakhstan, they're as tough as nails, Skinny guy survives, and in these harsh conditions, in no time you see this, like in Afghanistan, all guys who would lead the, whatever how they, in English language, how is it referred to, were all from Caucasus, most of them, because they're born warriors. It's in their blood. But they're not all physically stronger than these other guys, but there's something about the nerves, you see? Something about the attitude and resolve. It comes from mountains. Mountain people, they're different. This example simply because for you, you would relate to, you've seen, if you do this for a living, are you, personal trainer? We work with people or no? Okay, body work. So you work with different people. Do you have sportsmen, athletes, dancers? Not so much?
Yeah, yes. Yeah.
Well, because dancers need a lot of chiropractic and a lot of massages, right? Because they constantly hurt themselves, and athletes as well. But I'm just saying that you would know, right? Or if you go and see how people exercise, right? Like what types of exercise. These days, there's no shortage of all this kind of, the internet, social media, full of different approaches there, full of different approaches. But there is really, really core approaches for real physical strength, which doesn't even require none of that, what the gyms are equipped, because it really, the body is not trained in these conditions. So the nervous system, and that now in terms of density, you see, when the full process unfolds, whether this is pranatana or Kundalini is activated, let alone begins to make moves, right? When there's a swelling and this sense, this shocks throughout the body. And these shocks travel everywhere, right? And the state of the subtle body is being tested. It's first sends this kind of like waves to see what is open. Because God forbid if the Kundalini begins to move without what is open, it's most likely now day and age will move in the wrong place. This is what we've been dealing systematically in the early years, particularly when it comes to older awakenings. People who are already at that time were of my age and older, that things went astray and became chronic. Because one thing, the last thing one wants is to have awakened life force in unprepared subtle body, because it will find the inappropriate passage and begin this ascent, dropping down, exhausting the endocrine system. It's like highest excitation and then fall down. Highest excitation, fall down. How much can the body can take? I'm talking about the nervous system. If the nervous system is not fried right away, then it will get exhausted, and then all chronic conditions come from there. So you see, the state of the physical body, like, really doesn't, not even matters that much. So in other words, fitness here is of a different kind. Yogi's fitness is different than what maybe we understand as fitness in Western terms today. Yogi's fitness is psychological. This is where the fitness is first and foremost. It's psychic fitness, you see? So the yogi will come across perhaps as a very, very peaceful man, right? And not to take it like, today, women, serene. But don't make wrong assumptions. There's a lot of tapas and fire. There's a lot of fearlessness already. You see? It's not the fearlessness of the fighter who's cocky and ready to jump on a fight, jump on a gun all the time. You see? Again, that's why I've asked you, Bruce Lee, because there's a lot of that very, very useful, healthy pointers, all, not just be like water, from the same, I think, interview. Therefore, be like water, fluid like water. How long ago that was spoken, right? This also speaks about the real strength, where the real strength comes from the psychological strength. So, in other words, one never fights anyone. This is also Bruce Lee. I never fight an opponent. It's not about fighting an opponent. It's always fight at the level of one's own self. One only faced with oneself in all circumstances. This is the strength. And that's what required, because there is this intimate connection between the way prana moves in the body and all these samskaras that you have asked about, right? Accumulated in the body, in the subtle body, right? And that what is not yet sprouted is in the causal body. But we'll leave that alone because it's in the causal body. It will only begin to be purged out when the Kundalini will actually begin its work, a proper ascent through the Suṣumṇā. Because Suṣumṇā is also made out of these progressively subtler pathways, as you should know by now, where also all the states of consciousness are present: waking, dreaming, deep sleep, and the transcendent. So Suṣumṇā contains all that. So therefore it contains also the causal realm. So only when Kundalini travels fully through Suṣumṇā, then the possibility for that what yet to come begins to burn out of the body. See? This is like in language of the Patanjali Sutras, seeds are being roasted, literally. The seeds of the future sprouting are being roasted. So they will be impotent because they will not bring harvest, they will not grow. But all the samskaras that already manifested in this body, even the way the body took form in this life and how it evolved and took form in accord with one's desires. So each and every one of us, in a way, a kind of designed our body already from behind the scenes. You see? This may sound unfair to some who, like, let's say, not happy in their skin. And they, like, what about me? What have I done? Like, why? I'm not interested in this. It's a tough titty kind of thing. Because we're not talking about here how we would like it to be. It's not about, like, how we would like it to be, and it doesn't belong to the pleasing thing. Just like in the science of psychology, it doesn't care how painful it is to extract something that causes us suffering. That something that came and obstructs our happiness in a painful way will live in a painful way. That's the way it is, down to small, minute things. So these samskaras, in a way, they already inform the body, you see? They inform the body. And the knowledge of that, of course, is where we most likely will have traumas, where most likely we will have blockages as well. At the physical level now, perhaps, I don't know if I'm understanding and reading your question precisely enough, that's what it would do, right? Where most likely, what would be the weakness? Ankles, knees, hips, lower back, which curvature of the back, right? Where, even down to which vertebrae, right? All that would be, kind of programmed already. And then that psychosomatic work begins. So one would have to become very constantly attuned to what body tries to communicate already at that level. But if we are to speak about in relation to the process, in relation to the movement of prana and the way the prana moves, right? That in the day and age we live in now, the subtle body weakens and shrinks because of many different conditions, right? It's what feeds the subtle body is not the kind of nourishment that the physical body receives. Subtle body strengthens through something else. And tell you the truth, only pranayama can strengthen the subtle body. But pranayama is dangerous to be practiced the way it is devised thousands of years ago. It was dangerous to practice even in India 100 years ago, according to yogis, because of the various reasons. Because when we thin the sheath, because that's what intense pranayama can lead to if this is induced, if it's not involuntary, induced, right? One practices that, does that, then it bound to create the possibility for inviting influences at a psychic level into one's ahamkara, into one's auric field. This is one of the most undesirable thing about practice of pranayama, which can truly, truly strengthen, if not rebuild, the subtle body. See? So, yeah, that subtle body is built also through connection to, because of the word itself, subtle. Everything that connects us to the subtle, to the astral, non-physical, right? That's working that domain. So those of us who have a really strong imagination, strong inner world, build that inner world, live in the inner world, you see? Why do you think modern people cannot be alone for too long, cannot face anything? It's because of the weakness of the light body. Subtle body is weak. It can't be too long. You cannot be alone. It's like you have to have company right away. You have to somehow, somewhere, somewhat,
Just to clarify, has my assumption that a soft, subtle body perhaps in some way strengthens the subtle bodies, astral bodies, been erroneous?
Big, sorry?
has my thought that having kind of a soft, flexible body is strengthening the subtle bodies, is that kind of erroneous, wrong?
Again, it's tempting to think that when the body is stretched, right, when the body is like the more rigid is the physical body, right, then in a way, why would the body be rigid, right? Well, there are various reasons, right? There are, yes, you're right, you're pointing to that it's body and mind are not two realities, right? Body and mind is the same, in fact, reality, right? It's therefore better to speak about it as body mind. And it could be down to a lot of things, but do we assume that gymnasts have somehow greater predisposition because their body is so supple and trained? Gymnasts, they train that. Not necessarily, see? Not necessarily. We know many yogis did not have very, very apt body for, like they went into other extremes. Like sages neglected their body, almost like attitude of discarding, ignoring the body. We talked about it just outside today. Ignoring their bodies, particularly when it comes to these phases of prolonged meditations, prolonged meditative practices, full of accounts of like Nisargadatta's Maharaj toes being chewed by rats, and Ramana Maharshi atrophy of legs, cannot walk at all, had to be prescribed walk as a daily routine. So circumambulating Arunachala, it was his daily routine to restore all that vitality that he lost as a young man. Nim Karoli Baba, and list goes on. There was an opposite attitude completely to the body. There was no yoga, ashtanga, ayanga, what have you. They did not care for yoga of that kind. And then the yoga was not at all understood in that sense. It's not how bendy, how, again, just despite all my flexibility, and I was very flexible and physical at the same time, right? I could do split both ways very easily, even at the time when I would do squats with heavy weights. And so it was that kind of, but I always had difficulty to sit in lotus. I even hurt myself pushing it. Like really for several months, my knee were completely gone. But when the life force unleashed, I remember and just sitting on the cushion and my legs just whoop into lotus by themselves, as if they were made out of spaghettis, like there was no bones. And I didn't even use my hands. I don't remember locking them. They just went whoops into lotus like that. And then I could sit, I don't know, a long time. Yeah, of course, it get numb. You open up, you need to rub it. But I'm saying how different it is, you see? So when life force goes, it just opens everything up. Totally. You don't need to work on that. So this is why in this work, we don't kind of, do these exercises in favor of these exercises. The process unfolds, it will begin to tailor what one requires. The body will move in the way uniquely designed for so-and-so. This cannot be then turned into a system of Kundalini yoga. Everyone does the same thing, And nobody knows what Kundalini is except the name is Kundalini and it's branded. And we're still dealing with that. So in the Kundalini, and by the way, the manuscript is now being reworked. So the book in the making is not a transcript of the course itself. All of you will be in for a surprise. It's expanded, cut down, concise. It's a lot of work. But so, yes, of course, I've heard about this a lot, vagus nerve and a lot of this. In the section on 5 pranas, Udāna has been singled out as the most important prana in the sense of its function, because it's like prana of Cinderella. It's a prana which basically freed from doing anything that is required. All other pranas perform housework, whatever needs to be done, right? Maintain the house, right? It's Prāṇa, Apāna, everything is, Samāna, right? There's kitchen, someone's cooking, someone's cleaning, someone's evacuating, right? Someone's constantly doing the work. Udāna is only experienced by human beings for the sake of speech communication. And therefore, by the way, I keep coming across a lot of incorrect information, even now, right? Even now, in terms of when they define that. In average human being, in most human beings, Udāna moves from the navel to the nasal passages, which is the traversing of speech as we push it. We speak from here, right? And we can feel that. Professional singers sing from here and to the nasal passages. That's the movement of Udāna. But when Kundalini awakens, Udāna moves down. And it is the Udāna moving down that will then take over the Kundalini. And it will become, from there on, Urdhva Kundalini. From the same root as Udāna and Urdhva, like Urdhvareta, upward movement. So it is the importance of Udāna and the state of Udāna that is responsible for Kundalini in terms of the successful ascent and everything, absolute everything. So this is also have been observed in those in whom Udāna well developed as a pranic quality. Then, in most cases, it is very, very, it just brings the results. It simply delivers. And in those in whom it is not, then Kundalini would not have the power enough to rise even to the next chakra. It will swell there, it will be awakened there, but it will not rise at all. Because Kundalini does not rise. You see? Kundalini, chief of all the pranas, but it takes the characteristics of all the pranas that performed there. See? So this is the whole, the beauty and the structure of the, right? The valve that created by inhaled and exhaled breath, right? The movement of Prāṇa and Apāna, is that what goes like that, down, touches the Tālu, and this is where the internal point of duality, where the dichotomy is ignited. See? That's why when we have the, so let's say other forms of meditation, breathing through the heart, we speak about, connecting the inner and the outer Dvadashanta. So it's like two breaths become one. And that's what you experience in the suspension of breath, right? When not the Kumbhaka, not the suspension on inhalation or exhalation, not the Richaka or the Puraka, but when the breath seems to be neither going in nor going out. It's so subtle, it's imperceptible. Literally, there's no incoming or outgoing breath, and yet it's not breath retention. It's just breath has no movement, and yet we breathe. See, so you can remain in that for a long time. In Richaka or Puraka, we cannot remain for too long. Just as a most skillful divers still have to come out and gulp that air. So that movement here of incoming and outgoing breath is what creates the duality. This is what creates duality, not what non-dual teachers say. this internal anatomy, this is what creates it. Because it goes through the Tālu and collapses down immediately, goes under the Muladhara, rises again. And so this is why I call it like this valve. See, it's going like this, constantly, like this. And so therefore the subject-object checked, incoming, outgoing breath. Only this is suspended or interrupted when this very, very subtle breath suspension takes place. Again, not Richaka or Puraka. Those are fantastic because they are good for accumulating prana, either on exhalation or inhalation, creates Kumbhaka, either of the Kumbhakas. Both are Kumbhakas, but one is Richaka, one is Puraka, right? And that simply fills the whole trunk, right? Or massages the organs and creates the possibility for prana goes to where prana seldom goes. But in a suspension of breath, that king of all pranayamas, there is no such condition, but the breath is there and not there. And in that moment, we experience unity and it's granted. You see? Completely. Because at that point, Kundalini doesn't need to do that valve movement where it touches the Tālu and rushes down. So all these activities that are performed there through the pranic forces anyway, just as the most awakenings is when the uprising and descending breath meet in the gut and infused with Samāna. It literally creates an alchemical reaction. It's like fire and Samāna gets ignited and it creates tremendous heat. And that heat sends shock waves that go all the way down to the base of the spine. And when it comes to the base of the spine, that's what capable of awakening Kundalini. That resonance that is created from the combustion of the coming together of three pranas that otherwise do not and should not come together. See? Prana and Apāna perform their function, but they rush and meet in the gut and causes Samāna to explode, combust. And that creates that wave that goes down, and that creates resonance and heat of such degree that Kundalini begins to wake up. So this is the condition. And then, of course, up until Udāna moves down from the place where it functions, Kundalini will not rise. So first, therefore, there has to be the Udāna moving down. This is the big secret. It's a big, big yogic internal process. But everyone speaks about, oh, Kundalini will start rising. Kundalini doesn't do anything like that. Kundalini only moves as the pranas move. That's how it functions. Just as the sense of all pervasiveness that we experience, either in relation to the body, is all by performance of Vyāna. Vyāna takes over. So on the level of the body, that all pervasiveness, it's like it's one of the blisses, one of the classically spoken, described by Abhinavagupta in minute detail. One of the blisses we experience, that all pervasiveness, that scintillating, tingling sensation everywhere. And then when Kundalini is taken completely out, then that same Vyāna now gives us the sense of being everywhere. We forget about the body, not because we forget about the body, because Prana takes us out of the body. And that sense of all pervasiveness, we merge in Akasha. And then you don't feel the corporal boundaries of the body at all. You just, that's what exclaimed, like unraveled across the universe.